Emma Cole's screams pierced the quiet night air as the ER doors slammed open. Two nurses rushed to her, gasping at the sight, her body ravaged by flames. Patches of skin blistered and red, her face swollen beyond recognition. Strands of scorched hair clung to her cheeks as they laid her on a gurney, IVs already snaking into her arms before she could speak. The small-town clinic outside Dallas wasn't built for trauma like this, but there was no time to transfer her. Elsewhere, every breath she took was a battle. Her eyes glassy with pain, but alive, determined. They said I should have smiled. Emma's voice echoes in her own mind, layered beneath the chaos of shouting nurses and beeping machines. That a man like him doesn't take rejection well. But I never thought he'd try to end my life for saying no. Outside the trauma bay, police arrive, their radios crackling. One detective, older, steady, steps through the automatic doors and approaches Emma's bed. Her lips tremble as she leans closer to his ear, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Darren Holt," she breathes, then sinks back into the pillow, eyes fluttering closed. The name freezes the room. Darren Holt. To the world. He's the golden boy, a 29-year-old tech entrepreneur turned millionaire, his Instagram littered with images of fast cars, lavish parties, sun-soaked getaways, and inspirational quotes about ambition. In Texas. His name opens doors. Slick, charming, camera-ready. He's the guy people admire, envy, and trust. But as word spreads, the media scrambles. Emma's injuries make headlines, and Darren's name begins to thread itself into a darker narrative. Social media erupts, some defending the image they know, others digging deeper. Stories begin to surface, a pattern, whispers from ex-girlfriends, anonymous posts. Something sinister lurking behind that perfect smile. The public sees the face of a successful man who could have anyone he wants. Emma saw something else, something the cameras never caught. And now, with her body broken and her life on the line, the truth is clawing its way into the light. This isn't just a story about survival. It's about power, perception, and the lies we're willing to believe about the people we want to love. Emma Cole's world was built on quiet resilience. At 22, she bore more responsibility than most her age, juggling nursing school and part-time work while raising her 14-year-old brother, Caleb, 2 years earlier. Their lives had splintered in a single moment, a car accident that killed their parents and left Emma scrambling to hold together what little remained. Since then, she'd become sister, guardian, and breadwinner, taking shifts as a receptionist at a luxury hotel in Dallas to pay the bills. The job often meant dealing with entitled clients who snapped fingers and expected gratitude for leaving tips that wouldn't even cover a gallon of gas. But Emma endured, never letting her bitterness show, her focus always on Caleb and the future she hoped to build for them both. Their small apartment was modest but clean, filled with second-hand furniture and the laughter of a brother and sister, doing their best to make life livable. Emma cooked dinner while helping Caleb with his homework, her textbooks dog-eared and highlighted beside the stove. She didn't have time for parties or casual dating, not when every spare moment was a step closer to graduating, earning her license, and finally escaping the world of moneyed arrogance she worked in every day. She had dreams, but they were simple. Stability, peace, maybe a house with a yard where Caleb could feel like a kid again. Then Darren Holt walked into the hotel lobby. He didn't just arrive, he entered, like a man used to drawing attention, with a confidence that bordered on theatrical. Tailored suit, Rolex glinting beneath his cuff, a smile that lingered too long. Darren exuded charm, like it was a performance, and he expected applause. Emma saw him before he even reached the front desk, already sensing the kind of man he was. He flirted without hesitation, commenting on her eyes, her voice, the way she smiled when she typed. She gave him the same professional politeness she gave all difficult guests, her boundaries firm but graceful. Still, he didn't stop. Over the next week, the charm offensive began. Bouquets of rare orchids, chocolates from Paris, a silk scarf that probably costs more than her monthly rent. Each gift arrived with a card, each card with a compliment and a dinner invitation. When those failed, he upped the stakes, offering her a position at one of his companies, a real opportunity. He claimed, not charity. Emma declined every time, keeping her tone cool but respectful. She didn't want anything from Darren Holt, and she made that clear. Her best friend, Jessie, noticed the pattern quickly. Guys like him, she warned one night over greasy fries. At their favorite diner, they don't take no for an answer. Be careful, Em. They're used to getting what they want, and when they don't, Emma brushed it off, but the unease was growing. Darren's persistence wasn't romantic, it was invasive. Every time she thought he might give up, he came back bolder, and with each attempt, his mask slipped just a little more. Online, Darren was a public darling. His social media painted the picture of a self-made visionary, a tech mogul who rose from nothing to dominate the startup scene. He posted motivational videos about hard work, sponsored scholarships for young women in STEM, and frequently featured female entrepreneurs. In his Holt Rising Stars campaign, his followers praised his modern masculinity, his support for equality, his humble bragged captions. But behind the carefully curated FACA day, shadows lingered. There were rumors, whispers in Reddit threads and obscure forums. A non-disclosure agreement. Here, a sudden resignation there. One story told of a female intern who vanished from his company's roster without a trace. Her name erased from the website. Her LinkedIn wiped clean. A few former associates hinted at his temper, the way he could turn cold and cruel when crossed, but none of it ever stuck. Darren Holt was bulletproof, handsome, successful, endlessly likable in public, and dangerous in private, but only to the few who saw behind the smile. To Darren, Emma wasn't someone to admire, she was a challenge. Her rejection didn't bruise his ego, it enraged it. Because in his world, women didn't say no. They wanted the lifestyle, the power, the illusion. But Emma didn't want anything from him, and that made her irresistible. Not because she was special to him, but because she dared to say no and mean it. And now, Darren wasn't chasing Emma because he liked her. He was chasing her because she had refused to be conquered. And in his mind, that made her his dot. Emma never wanted to go to Darren Holt's party, but when she realized it could be a chance to promote the GoFundMe campaign she'd started to help pay for Caleb's school tuition, she forced herself into a borrowed dress, plastered on a polite smile, and agreed to attend. It was a glittering affair held in the backyard of a sprawling estate outside Dallas, with fairy lights strung across trees, champagne flutes in every hand, and influencers posing beside ice sculptures and rented supercars. Emma moved through the crowd carefully, handing out cards with Caleb's campaign link, trying to stay focused on why she was there. But she could feel Darren watching her. He found her in the garden, away from the music, where string lights flickered, softly above a marble fountain. He cornered her, all charm at first, brushing a strand of hair from her face, like they were old lovers instead of barely acquaintances. "You look beautiful tonight," Emma," he said, stepping too close. When she tried to move away, he grabbed her arm, not hard, but possessive. "I'm not your enemy. I'm trying to help you." She pulled free, loud enough this time for people nearby to hear. "You don't own me, Darren. I'm not some prize you get to buy." The air shifted. Conversations around them died. Eyes turned. Darren's face tightened, but he forced a smile, playing it off with a nervous laugh. "No harm meant," he said, his voice smooth but eyes cold. Didn't realize standing too close was a crime now. Emma walked away without responding, heart pounding in her chest. She didn't regret it, not for a second, but she felt the shift. The way the room treated her differently now. She had embarrassed him, and men like Darren didn't forget. That she left the party early, declining Jesse's offer to walk her out. The Uber dropped her 2 blocks from her apartment, a precaution she always took when coming home alone. As she walked the rest of the way, a black SUV trailed behind her slowly. She glanced back, tension gripping her spine, but the vehicle turned off at the next street. She didn't report it. She wanted to believe it was just coincidence. By the time she got home, Caleb was asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, the glow of a paused video game flickering on the screen. Emma kissed his forehead and went to bed, exhaustion catching up to her. At 2 a.m., the window in their shared living room shattered with a violent pop. Flames erupted seconds later. A Molotov cocktail, crude but effective, had landed among their books and blankets. The fire spread fast. Caleb woke first, coughing from the smoke. He called out for Emma, pulled her door open to find the hall already glowing with orange light. She didn't respond at first, the heat, the smoke, the panic, but when she did, it was with a scream. Caleb escaped with burns along his forearm, running barefoot across the street as neighbors came rushing out. A man from 2 doors down kicked Emma's window in, pulling her from the room just as part of the ceiling collapsed. Her nightgown was scorched, skin blistering, and her breath came in rattling gasps. But she was alive. By dawn, their apartment was gutted. Caleb sat wrapped in a blanket in the back of an ambulance, crying quietly. Emma was barely conscious. Detective Marla Reeves was assigned the case. She arrived just as the fire department doused the last of the smoke. Calm, experienced, and intuitive. She went through Emma's phone while the young woman lay bandaged in the ICU. One text stood out. Time-stamped hours before the attack. "You made the wrong choice." When Emma woke later that morning, groggy from painkillers, Reeves sat at her bedside and asked a single question. "Is there anyone who might want to hurt you?" Emma's voice was a rasp. "Darren Holt," she whispered. "He's the only one who's ever threatened me." The detective nodded, but her expression remained unreadable. They had a name, but no fingerprints, no camera footage, no proof Darren was anywhere near Emma's apartment that night. When confronted, Darren issued a calm, well-rehearsed denial. He called the accusation an opportunistic lie and claimed he'd left the party hours before Emma did. "It's tragic what happened to her," he said to reporters. "But to suggest I'm capable of something like that, it's outrageous. I've only ever tried to help her." And just like that, the public battle began between Emma's truth and Darren's image. Emma's story exploded across the internet. Within days, news outlets picked it up first, framing her as the survivor of a brutal arson attack with connections to tech mogul Darren Holt. At first, there was sympathy, hashtags, supporting her, a few local fundraising efforts for her recovery, even a brief surge in donations to Caleb's GoFundMe. But the support was quickly drowned by the other narrative, the one Darren's PR teen carefully sculpted and unleashed like a virus. They painted Emma not as a victim, but a vengeful ex who'd been spurned and was now exploiting tragedy. For fame, clips of Darren at charity events played on loop. Interviews showed him dabbing his eyes, shaking his head solemnly. "I don't know why she's doing this," he said on one morning show, "but I pray she heals physically and emotionally." Then came the trolls, thousands of them. Strangers dissected her old photos, her Instagram captions, her clothing, her tone. They called her a liar, an opportunist, a bitter girl trying to ruin a good man's life. Anonymous accounts flooded her inbox with death threats. She deleted every social app, but it didn't stop the damage. Even in real life, it followed her. Some of her classmates at nursing school began avoiding her. Group projects suddenly dissolved. One girl whispered that Emma was just looking for attention, that if Darren had really done it, he'd be in jail by now. The silence hurt more than the insults. Then came the lawsuit. Defamation. Darren sued her for tens of millions. A headline-grabbing figure designed to terrify her into submission. Emma didn't have money for a lawyer, let alone the resources, to battle a man with an army of corporate litigators. She was still healing, physically and emotionally, her skin tight with grafts, her confidence shredded. When the notice came, she stared at it for hours, heart pounding in her ears, unsure whether to scream or collapse. Help came in the form of Alex Grant, a legal aid attorney with a sharp jawline, a sharper tongue, and a quiet fury beneath his calm exterior. He showed up uninvited after reading about Emma's case online, carrying a leather satchel and a reputation for dismantling trust fund heirs in court. "I've seen men like Holt before," he told her on their first meeting, pushing his glasses up his nose. "They wrap themselves in charity work and good press and think no one will ever touch them. I believe you, and I don't scare easy." Emma didn't know whether to cry or hug him. For the first time since the fire, she felt a sliver of hope. While Alex began digging into Darren's past, Emma's internal world was unraveling. Her body betrayed her daily. The burns itched and stung. The mirror no longer reflected a face she recognized. She began having flashbacks at random, the glass shattering, the roar of fire, Caleb's screaming. Sometimes she'd wake up choking on air that wasn't full of smoke. Other times, she'd catch herself locking every door. In the apartment twice, sometimes 3 times. She couldn't sleep without keeping a fire extinguisher beside her bed. Guilt wrapped itself around her like a shroud, not just for what had happened to her, but for what it had done to Caleb. He had stopped talking much. His burns had mostly healed, but the boy who used to joke through everything now skipped school, drifted through the apartment like a ghost. Emma caught him watching the news one night, a clip of Darren laughing with celebrities. "Why does everyone believe him?" Caleb asked quietly, not looking away. Emma had no answer. She just pulled him close and cried. One night, unable to sleep, she reopened the social media account she had deactivated weeks ago, curious to see what the world still thought of her. She shouldn't have. The comments were worse than ever. But then, buried in the inbox of filtered messages, one stood out. No profile photo. No name. Just a single line. Asterisk, he tried to strangle me in 2021. I signed an NDA. I have proof. Let me know if you want to fight him for real. Asterisk. Emma stared at the message, her hands trembling. A heartbeat passed. Then 2. And then, for the first time in weeks, she smiled. Not because she felt safe or whole again, but because she wasn't alone. There were others. And someone out there, just like her, was ready to burn down the lie. The case began to unravel with a whisper, not a bang. Emma and Alex met Sachet, the former intern, who had sent the anonymous message in a quiet parking garage outside the city. Far from cameras and microphones, Sasha looked older than her 25 years, her eyes constantly scanning the shadows. She handed Alex a flash drive and an envelope of time-stamped texts. "He tried to choke me in his office," she said flatly. "Said if I spoke, he'd ruin me. My parents begged me to sign the NDA. Said we couldn't afford a fight." The voice memo on the drive was chilling. Darren, clearly drunk, slurring threats about how women needed to learn their place. There were messages, too. Screenshots of manipulation, coercion, apologies that read more like veiled commands. And Sasha wasn't alone with her help. Alex and Emma tracked down 2 more women, one from Dallas, another from Los Angeles, both of whom had taken hush money after violent encounters with Darren. One had been threatened with revenge porn if she didn't disappear. The other had a scar just beneath her collarbone from a wine glass he'd shattered in anger. Neither had ever spoken publicly. But with Emma leading the charge, and with legal protection offered by Alex's firm, they agreed to testify if needed. As their case strengthened, Darren's facade began to slip. Behind closed doors, he grew erratic. His Instagram posts turned defensive, full of thinly veiled rants about false victims and cancel culture. Then came the real threats. 2 men approached Alex outside his office one night, cornering him in the parking lot and warning him to drop the case or drop dead. They didn't take his phone or wallet, just made the point. Days later, Emma found her tires slashed in the hospital parking garage after a physical therapy session. Caleb started sleeping with a baseball bat beside his bed. Still, neither Emma nor Alex backed down. The courtroom was a circus from day one. Media packed the gallery. Darren arrived every morning in a tailored suit with his all-star legal team. In tow, and Emma, wearing long sleeves to hide the scars, chin held high, braced for battle. The prosecution started strong, presenting medical reports, expert witnesses, and circumstantial evidence that pointed to Darren's involvement in the arson. But during cross-examination, his attorneys tore into Emma's credibility, painting her as emotionally unstable, a woman with a tragic past looking for a villain to blame. They showed photos of her at the party, suggested she had pursued Darren, insinuated that everything was about money and attention. Emma felt stripped bare. Her voice shook. Her burns ached. For a moment, she felt like they might win. Then Alex stood. His tone was measured, but his words cut like razors. He presented Sasha's voice memo first. The room fell dead silent as Darren's voice snarled through the speakers, threatening to bury anyone who crossed him. Then came the texts, methodically time-stamped and corroborated. 2 more. Women submitted sworn affidavits detailing eerily similar threats and violent episodes. But it was the final piece of evidence that shifted the trial. A burner phone Alex had subpoenaed records for, one traced back to Darren's assistant and linked to a known arsonist with a history of political firebombings. One of the calls had been made just hours before the fire at Emma's apartment, and then Caleb took the stand. His voice cracked as he described waking up to flames, hearing his sister's screams, trying to drag her out while the room filled with smoke. He described the nightmares, the fear, how Emma still checked on him twice a night even when she could barely walk. "She didn't make this up," he said, tears running freely. "She's the strongest person I know, and he tried to kill her. Even Darren couldn't maintain his composure then. The smugness vanished. His jaw tightened. He whispered furiously to his lawyers, eyes darting. When court adjourned for the day, the prosecution announced that they were filing additional charges: witness intimidation, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and tampering with evidence. The media pivoted overnight. The public tide shifted. And for the first time in his carefully curated life, Darren Holt was no longer untouchable. He was exposed. And Emma, scarred but unbroken, was no longer just a survivor. She was a reckoning. Darren Holt sat stone-faced as the judge denied him bail, the courtroom buzzing with restrained tension. The verdict came down weeks later, guilty on all counts: attempted murder, obstruction of justice, multiple counts of assault, made possible after Sasha and the other women testified, breaking their NDAs in the name of justice. The courtroom erupted in quiet gasps when the sentence was read: 27 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 15. Emma didn't cry. She didn't smile either. She simply exhaled, as if she'd been holding her breath for months, and finally let it go. Darren was led away in cuffs, stripped of his designer suits, his curated lifestyle, his invincibility. The headlines turned on him with the same speed they once adored him. He was no longer the tech golden boy. He was a cautionary tale. In the months that followed, Emma began to piece her life back together, shard by shard. The physical scars on her arms and back would never fully fade, but she wore them with a quiet dignity, no longer hiding them beneath long sleeves. Therapy, both physical and psychological, became a regular part of her week. It was slow, painful work, but she committed to it with the same grit that got her through court. She started speaking at local women's shelters, sharing her story not for pity, but to give voice to others too afraid to speak. Each time she stood before a room of survivors, her voice grew steadier. A legal aid fund was established in her name, thanks to Alex and a non-profit network of attorneys. For the ones who can't afford to fight, she said at the launch event. No one should have to battle monsters alone. She took her nursing board exams 6 months after the trial ended. Passed on her first try. The hospital that had treated her after the fire. The one where she had clung to life and whispered Darren's name through burned lips. Offered her a job in their trauma unit. She accepted it with trembling hands and a full heart. On her first day, she stood for a moment in the same hallway where it all began, breathing in the scent of antiseptic and remembering that terrified girl who had stumbled through the doors. She wasn't that girl anymore. Emma and Caleb moved shortly after to a quiet house near a lake outside Denton. It wasn't fancy, but it was peaceful. Caleb's laughter slowly returned. He started skateboarding again, even made a few friends at his new school. At night, they'd sit on the porch, watching the water shimmer under the moonlight. The sounds of sirens and headlines far behind them. On the 1-year anniversary of the fire, Emma stood at a podium at a citywide domestic violence awareness. Event cameras flashed. Reporters took notes. She didn't flinch. Her voice rang out clear and steady. They tried to destroy me, burn me down, but fire only makes steel. And steel is what she had become. 1 year later, Emma stood at the front of a quiet high school auditorium, facing a group of teenage girls who watched her with a mixture of curiosity and awe. Her scrubs were neatly pressed, her hair pulled back, and for the first time in public, her scars were uncovered, a faint network of burns along her neck and arm, no longer hidden beneath fabric or shame. The room was still as she recounted her story, not with bitterness, but with purpose. She spoke about fear, about survival, about how strength doesn't always feel like strength when you're in the middle of the fire. And then she paused, looked each girl in the eye, and said, "No one has the right to punish you for saying no." Her voice didn't waver. There was a beat of silence, and then a few claps. More followed. Soon the whole room was on its feet, applauding, some wiping their eyes, others cheering softly. Emma didn't smile for the attention. She smiled because they'd heard her. The words had landed. The message was alive. As she stepped off the stage, her eyes found Caleb in the back row. He was taller now, sitting up straight, his face lit up with pride. He gave her a thumbs up, grinning, and she laughed softly through her tears. That moment, more than any courtroom victory, more than any article or fundraiser, felt like the true turning point. Outside, the sun was warm. Emma stood for a moment, breathing deeply, her lungs filling not with smoke or panic, but clean air and calm. The scars were still there. The past hadn't disappeared, but the weight was lighter now. She was not entirely healed. Maybe she never would be, but she was no longer running, no longer hiding. She was free.